Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of Trust 23. I think we can all agree that day 1 was awesome. My key takeaways are first, that data leaders are being called upon more than ever to enable data-driven decision-making while under tough cost and resource pressures. We also heard that data quality is a universal pain point and priority. And to that end, I was thrilled to introduce the latest capabilities of the Data Integrity Suite, particularly its new data quality service. Today, we have an impressive group of experts here to share their perspective on data for decision-making and regulatory compliance, and to show off the latest innovations in customer communication management. Our first speaker is Dan Vesett from IDC Research. Dan leads IDC's big data and analytics research on business intelligence, analytics, and enterprise software, and its impact on business decision-making, automation, and data monetization. You may have seen Dan quoted in business and industry publications, including the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and CIO. And we're thrilled to have Dan here to share his insights from his experience as a user, implementer, and analyst of business intelligence software. Take it away, Dan.
Hi, I'd like to thank you for joining me today, and I want to thank the Precisely team for the opportunity to share some of IDC's latest research on a new opportunity. It's an opportunity that we are hearing about from business executives, both in private conversations, but also in how they talk about it in public venues, such as quarterly calls. They're not asking for the biggest data lakes. They're not asking for most sophisticated machine learning models. They're not asking for better-looking dashboards. What they are asking for is how to accelerate decision velocity for their organizations. This is a monumental shift in the involvement of business executives in the topic of data, one that has been really dominated and controlled by the IT leadership in the past. It's a huge change, and I want to share some of IDC's research on how you can address this opportunity. And I know it's a topic that is relevant to everyone, because after all, everyone makes decisions. If there's one thing I know about all of you listening to us today, is that you've made some decisions today. Maybe they were mundane decisions, 1 cup of coffee or 2 cups of coffee, coffee or tea. Some of these decisions were probably more weightier. Maybe some were life-changing. Some of these decisions may have taken days or weeks to arrive at, and some may have taken just a few seconds. Perhaps something like this one. What you just saw was a 2-second action preceded by rapid decision-making in the car, in the pit, and in the office. This is Formula One, and what you just saw was a race that happened in 2019 in Brazil at the Grand Prix, where the Red Bull team managed to change all 4 tires in 1.82 seconds. They ended up winning that race. But that's not all. There's more we can learn from Formula One racing and the team. And I had an opportunity to speak to one of the team directors from a different team, the Mercedes team, Jeff Willis, who talked about how data is taken from the car. That data is analyzed. These are highly instrumented cars. That data is analyzed. And then they're taking the lessons learned from that analysis, and they are implementing those changes in the next race. But what was especially interesting and a big lesson for me was what he said next when he talked about how they are running their operations today. And I'm going to quote Jeff here. He said, "Today, we design and simulate in the virtual world, and the real world just intrudes through a validation step of those models." So imagine what a mental shift that is in how they're approaching their operations. Having that full situational awareness in a digital world, being able to create the data, being able to ensure data integrity, being able to analyze it, simulate it, and eventually arrive at decisions in the virtual world and then substantiate it in the physical world. Wouldn't we all like to have that kind of a capability? But of course, Formula One is a highly constrained environment. They know the track, they know the rules. There's even a limit on how much they can spend on each car per season. The real world is much more complex. much more volatile. And that complexity takes on different forms. There's certainly data complexity. And this is some research that we did at the end of 2022 with over 1,000 organizations when we asked which factors are expected to add complexity to your data processing over the next 12 months, so throughout 2023. And you can see, obviously, here our old friends, the 3 Vs, volume of data, velocity of data, variety of data. There's now also complexity in spreading that data over geographic regions and with jurisdictional differences in how data is regulated. So that's one vector of complexity, but there are also others. There are deployment modes. So sometimes technology to process data is deployed centrally. There's one deployment, and other times it's deployed across multiple business units. And for each of you, that may differ. There's no one right way to deploy any one technology. And you can see here variety even across things like data governance and privacy management technology and data warehouses and data lakes, operational databases. So there's quite a bit of complexity and variety that comes from that. Then there is deployment location complexities, and today's world is absolutely, definitely hybrid and will stay so for the foreseeable future. There are public cloud deployments, there are private cloud deployments, on-premises is still there. In our research, we find that when organizations move a database to the cloud, for example, on average, it takes 3 years to decommission the old on-premises solution. So that in itself creates complexity for that intervening time period. There's also funding complexity. Sometimes funding is centralized, sometimes it's decentralized. Some of the funding may come from business, some may come from IT. Again, there's no one right way to prescribe how funding works in a best case scenario. Depends on your organizational structure, depends on your internal funding strategies, but it does add an additional layer of complexity. And finally, something that I would call the skills complexity. And this is really about continued lack and challenge around finding subject matter experts in data science, in data analysis, but also in data architecture and in data engineering. So all the people with skills that you have, there's still a shortage of that, and you can see here what a challenge that is for organizations of different sizes, from mid-sized organizations all the way to the largest organizations. All this complexity and uncertainty has impacts, and one of those impacts is data waste. So we find that 1/3 of executives are telling us that often they're in situations where they receive data, but they don't get to use it. So think about the waste that happens. So all that effort that goes into acquiring the data, ensuring its integrity, analyzing, creating models, creating reports is not being used, where the executive defaults back to the non-data-driven decision-making. Another impact that we see from all those challenges and that complexity is impact on data decay. So interestingly, we found that 50% of respondents, again, to a study we did late 2022, over 1,000 respondents across industries, across different sizes, 50% of respondents say that data loses value within hours. And 3/4 of respondents say the data loses value within days. So if it's not acted upon within those time frames, again, there's a lot of negative impact on all the effort that went into data collection, ensuring data integrity, analysis, development of insights in an effort to make better and faster decisions. This leads to shortcomings in what we're calling decision velocity. And I'll get to our definition of decision velocity in a second, but I wanted to highlight some of the issues here. I'm not going to go through all of these points, but for example, there's an impact on synthesizing internal and external data and information. So you may want to be able to incorporate external information about customers with your internal customer data, or you may want to bring in location data, geolocation data, and incorporate that with your internal data. That's one example that gets hampered if that complexity is not handled. Some other points here. Servicing actionable information to users in a flow of work is another shortcoming that many organizations are struggling with. So they may have great models. Again, they may have great data lakes and data warehouses and data lake houses now. But if they're not able to develop insights and push them out through various applications and make sure that they're in the flow of work, decision velocity is impacted. And finally, demonstrating high levels of trust in data and insights. Again, even if the data is pushed out, if the users don't trust it, they're not going to take action on it. Again, that impacts decision velocity, creates unnecessary friction in the flow of that information. Now, our contention is that to address this complexity and the uncertainty, to thrive in this era of digital business requires decision velocity. But first, to understand decision velocity, we need to understand what is decision making, because it is a process. And one way to understand this is to look at this framework. This is something that we adapted from a framework that's called an OODA loop, which was developed by Colonel John Boyd in the 70s. He was in the U.S. military at the time, the Air Force, and later became a business consultant as well. So the OODA loop stands for observe, orient, decide, and act, the steps in any type of a decision-making process. So it's observation of the data, both internal and external data, synthesis of that data, orientation towards analysis and insights development, and then deciding based on various alternatives and the risks involved, and then taking action, and then closing the loop, so it's a continuous loop. What I'm showing here is a highly simplified version of the actual framework, which includes many different feedback loops. And I would encourage all of you to look up OODA loop and get a little bit more familiar with that framework and that methodology. Now, of course, reality is much more complex, but this model will suffice for today. We at IDC, we did want to add one more element to this model. And so when we are defining decision velocity, what we mean by it is a combination of speed and control. You certainly want to go through that loop as fast as possible, but there's also need to have control over that speed. And in this case, control is governance, but it's also timing. It's having safeguards against human decision-making bias that behavioral economists warn us against. Control is ensuring compliance with regulations. And also control is data integrity, having the accuracy and consistency and the context, not just quality, which will enable decision velocity. If you just focus on speed, you're not going to take that turn. You may get out of control. But you also need to be cautious about too much control, because then you're stifling innovation and ability to go through that loop as fast as possible. And there's a growing number of organizations who understand this and are investing towards this. So in the survey data that I'm showing you right now, we asked organizations what's most important for decision velocity. Is it speed by itself? Is it control by itself? Or is it the combination of speed and control? And then we also asked them about their own digital maturity, so going from not at all digital to mostly digital. And what we find is that digitally more mature organizations assign importance to having both speed and control 2 times more frequently as a measure of decision velocity. But there is more. One more element I think we need to add into this conversation, because there are different decision types in most organizations. Even in Formula One, if we just extend that example, there are those pit stop decisions, that 2 seconds that it took to change the tires. And then there are decisions about the race plan itself. And then there may be higher level decisions about the driver selection. So identifying who the driver may be for the team for several years to come, and signing multi-million-dollar contracts with that driver. And this is recognition is important in understanding the differences and the different requirements for the different decision types, both technical requirements as well as financial requirements. And we can abstract from this view to other businesses across industries. So when we look at decision types, there are some situational decisions, and IDC, we estimate that 13% of use cases require decisions to be made in seconds to support those situational decisions. And then there are scenario decisions. About 2/3 of use cases require decisions to be made in minutes or hours. And then there are portfolio decisions, kind of higher level decisions. About 20% of use cases require decisions to be made in days, and sometimes that could extend into weeks or even months, let's say, when you're talking about a merger and acquisition or entry into a new country with your products and services. One example from financial services across these three types would be, for example, blocking a suspected fraudulent transaction. That would be an example of a situational decision. Scenario decision could be approving a simple loan, for example. It could take hours in certain circumstances. And then a portfolio decision could be maybe a decision to hire a chief risk officer for that organization. That would be a higher level decision. And you can imagine similar types of decisions across industries in your organizations, across business processes. So every organization would have certain decisions that fall into each of those three categories. Now, I highlighted earlier all the challenges and the complexity, but that was not to scare anyone off. The case I'm making is for the opportunity, for the impact that all of you as data professionals can amplify. It's really a call to action, and progress is already being made by some amongst you. And we can see that progress even from the priorities that organizations are setting, which again, in the early part of the year, when we looked at what those priorities are for 2023, we can see here at the top, most frequently mentioned was data security. Now, every study we make has data security at the top. You cannot function in today's digital world without a focus in data security. But interestingly, that's followed by increasing trust in data, increasing governance and control of various data management processes and technologies, contextualizing data for users across the organization to ensure that the information is actionable, and then decreasing exceptions and risks caused by data quality issues. So if we look at this in aggregate, this is data integrity, a critical component of control in decision velocity, which is needed to make confident business decisions based on trusted data. There's also progress in automation. About 60% of organizations are telling us that they are incorporating more automation, some of it machine learning based, across the decision-making workflow. So that has increased. About 2/3 of organizations say that metadata is growing faster than the raw data. And the reason I bring that up is that that suggests that more of the unorganized data is being organized, both structured data, but also increasingly also unstructured data. It could be long-form text, it could be short-form text, it could be video, image, audio data. So metadata is growing, suggesting that it's being organized, made ready for a downstream analysis and development of insights, and ultimately to help increase decision velocity. And then the final point, I think, in automation progress is that 40% of organizations are prioritizing budgets for streaming data analysis. And I bring that up to highlight that there is also important advancements being made in improving the speed of decision making. Now, all of these efforts are bearing fruit. And we're seeing that there are a lot of benefits that organizations are enjoying from these efforts. So what we're showing here is improvements, and the scale that you're seeing here is from 1 to 10. So these are organizations that are showing good, strong level of improvement across these factors, improving decision quality, improving timeliness of decisions, improving employee productivity, as well as enterprise-wide knowledge capture and knowledge retention and knowledge sharing, which is so important to enable the scaling of these solutions. I'm not going to go through all of these, but maybe trust, mention one more, trust in data and information and insights, which again is part of some of those data integrity investments that I mentioned earlier. So the opportunity is there. Opportunity is there to improve decision velocity and to really affect the outcomes for your organizations. But with that comes the need to reframe and reorient towards some new initiatives and new solutions. And let me just quickly go through some of those. First, is to look at data no longer as a project, but as a product, an asset that both internal users and sometimes your partners or customers have readily available for them to take as an input into other productive uses for the data. Another one is data integrity, and I mentioned this several times already, but it's important to focus not only on data quality, but on overall data integrity, which includes accuracy and consistency and context, in addition to quality. It's also to acknowledge that while we live today in an era of emergent artificial intelligence, there are other aspects of intelligence. We need to focus on data intelligence, understanding data lineage, understanding data quality, understanding where the data is and is coming from. Also location intelligence and decision intelligence, adding all those elements both to artificial intelligence and all the business intelligence investments that have already been made. And finally, focusing on knowledge management and ultimately on enterprise digital twins, to have that environment that Formula One team director has, to be able to make decisions increasingly in a digital environment and then substantiate them in a physical environment. Now at IDC, all of these technologies and all the underlying enabling technologies together is something that we call the enterprise intelligence architecture. And I hope that my contribution to this precisely conference will allow you to take away just a few nuggets of valuable information to move toward an enterprise intelligence architecture and greater decision velocity. Thank you.
One of the things that happened during the pandemic was the fact that we were unable to participate in our biannual trade shows, which is called the NAMM show. That trade show would always take place in January and June or July, respectively, in two different areas of the country. Since conferences were not a thing during the pandemic, what we ended up having to do on both the master data side and the PIM side, we use Enterworks for our PIM, and we use automation, formerly Windshuttle Studio, on our master data side. We were able to come up with a virtual trade show to allow our dealers to be able to access our new products online through our dealer portal, which is built internally by other teams within IT, and is PIM powered and of course master data powered. So what ended up happening was we were able to put on our trade shows with no delay and sell products, and we ended up having record years during the pandemic.
Enriched data is central to everything that we do. Our members are realtors nationwide. They belong to the National Association of Realtors. They come to us to find data and information in context. We've been able to assemble the largest property database in the United States. We started with layering MLS data, public records data, bringing it together to be parcel-centric versus fractured and scattered. We've gone on from there to add school information, neighborhood information, risk data. We have great geocoding thanks to our partnership with Precisely. And having that all come together, that saves the realtor time. They're not wandering around trying to find this data in different places. Instead, they can quickly generate a report, they can serve a client, and that's so important, especially with today's market challenges. Having enriched, reliable, accurate, and timely data, it's at the center of everything we do to serve them.
It's fantastic to see the power of data to drive faster, more confident business decisions based upon trusted data. I'd now like to bring out Chris Hall, Senior Vice President of Product and Operations from our Engage business. Chris and his team will be unveiling the new Engage One Rapid CX, a unified customer communication management platform that enables companies like yours to personalize and automate customer communications.
Hi, I'm Chris Hall, Senior Vice President of Product and Operations here at Precisely. Today, I'd like to introduce you to the Engage part of our business and our cloud customer communication managed service, Engage One Rapid CX. Throughout the summit, you've heard and learned how critical data integrity is to your business. But I want to expand on that to show you how data is really the cornerstone for delivering excellent customer experiences. I also want to share with you the impact on your business of aligning your data integrity efforts with your customer communication practices. And finally, you're going to see an awesome demo from Kristen Aldridge and our new product, Engage One Rapid CX. Now for some fun facts. Did you know that US businesses risk $1.8 trillion in sales each year due to bad experiences? I'm sure everyone here has canceled a service or stopped visiting a business. When you add it all up, it equals $1.8 trillion. Or did you know 48% of polled companies report that their biggest challenge in creating customer experiences is data accessibility? How about that only 12% have their customer communications fully integrated into their CRM? And those 12%, newer businesses, few legacy systems, that's just when asked about CRMs. Most companies that we work with, we have 10 to 20 systems that we need to integrate to. By not having access to real-time data, or in some cases, any data, companies expose themselves to fragmented customer experiences, operational inefficiencies, and limited governance ability. This leads us to the common reality impacting customer communications. Many companies use siloed communication solutions, typically one or more solution to support each communication channel. This makes it almost impossible to deliver controlled and connected customer journeys where each communication and interaction is personalized for maximum impact and clarity and can account for what was communicated before, irrespective of channel. This siloed approach has many additional challenges. For example, duplicate integrations are required for each core system and channel. It also becomes hard to make updates to communications and ensure consistency across channels. Not to mention the challenges of getting communication updates approved for all channels by all stakeholders, and then working with IT to get each communication update for each channel deployed into production. Siloed data, siloed communication systems, and this integration mess are reasons why 67% of CX leaders identify room for improvement in the customer experiences they deliver. That's also probably why it takes many organizations up to 90 days to make simple changes to customer communications across all channels. Instead of integrating with separate systems to manage each communication channel, forward-thinking companies are adopting a single, cloud-hosted, integrated customer engagement platform. So that the way they can deliver controlled and connected customer journeys where each communication and interaction is personalized for maximum impact and clarity, and it can account for what was communicated before, irrespective of channel. A cloud-hosted integrated customer engagement platform like Engage One Rapid CX lets you manage, review, update, and audit the contents of your communication using a single, intuitive browser user interface. An additional platform benefit is that you can integrate with it once for all channels. When you want to engage with customers on a new channel like WhatsApp, there's no need for new connections on your side. This also means that if a particular communication or policy drives additional volume to your call center, or say, interest rates change again, then you can update these communications in minutes instead of days to furnish your customers with the information they need quickly. And you can do this while strictly adhering to centrally defined approval processes by your brand team to ensure regulatory and brand compliance. Now let's take a look at some of the main capabilities of Engage One Rapid CX. Content rules and management, communication creation for email, print, SMS, and more, delivery API services, secure transaction handling, data and event API integrations, preference and profile management of your customers, governance, reporting, and archiving for regulatory compliance. All of this is built on a serverless, microservices-driven architecture for flexibility. But the platform, it's only as good as the people and processes that surround it. And in that department, we've got you covered. The Precisely Engaged team brings over 15 years of experience migrating and implementing clients onto a hosted, integrated customer engagement platform in several highly regulated industries. The proof's also in our results. Customer communication management operating costs dropped by up to 30% for organizations adopting hosted managed services. These annual savings are typically in the $5 to $7 million range. And change management turnaround can drop from that average of 90 days to just 1, all while ensuring regulatory requirements are being met. So let's get to the demo so you can see the end-to-end value that EngageOne RapidCX delivers. Kristen, take it away.
Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, one of the primary benefits of RapidCX is faster change management. For example, our customers on average spent anywhere from 30 to 90 days on change management prior to RapidCX. Oftentimes, the work had to be completed by an IT resource. That work would have to be scheduled, tested, and validated prior to a scheduled deployment to their production environment. With RapidCX, non-technical business users can make content and business rule changes to communications via the UI, whether that be a PDF, an email, an SMS, or even an in-app template. Every change made within RapidCX is proofed and submitted to a governance workflow for approval and ultimately production activation. Now let's move into the demo and see RapidCX change management in action. For our demo today, we're going to meet Kelly. Kelly is a business analyst for Fortunity Bank, and part of her job is to manage content changes to customer communications. Kelly has been notified that the interest rate will be changing as of June 1st, which means the interest rate change templates will have to be updated with the new rate and an effective date by May 25th, which is when the system communications are triggered. We'll follow along as Kelly locates the current version of the interest rate templates, edits the interest rate, previews the communication, creates a proof of the communication with test data, submits the proof for governance review by the legal and compliance team members, and finally activates the template for production use, all within a short period of time. Welcome to RapidCX. So as Kelly logs in, you'll see that there are multiple modules available based on Kelly's user access rights. First, we'll step through the template changes that Kelly has to make. Then we'll do a quick overview of some of the other RapidCX modules you didn't see today, but they are no less important to the unified communications platform. To make the requested template change, Kelly's first going to click into the communication templates, which is where all of the templates are housed within RapidCX. Then we're going to move into Communication Builder, and Kelly wants to find all of the interest rate templates within the system. So she's going to type in interest here. You'll see that there are 3 templates available dependent upon their delivery channel: the PDF template, the SMS template, and the email template. She's going to click on the email template since this is the one she wants to change. And right off the bat here, you're going to see automatic version control. So every single change within the system is recorded for a full audit trail behind each and every version. We can also see the status of that particular version, whether or not there's been a governance approval behind it, any kind of proofing output that was associated with the version, and any kind of metadata variables that have been associated with the template to that point. So Kelly wants to use the latest version of the template to make her changes. So we're going to click on version 8. And that's going to move us to the template versioning page. It's going to confirm that the communication definition that's being used to date is the correct version. Since Kelly's not adding any additional data variables, we're going to leave the communication definition as it is. We're going to update the description to say updated for 6/1/23 rate change. We'll hit next. And then Kelly's going to be presented with the email template itself. And you can see there's a communication specific friendly from. There's a personalized subject line using the metadata variables that are available for this particular communication. And where we really want to make the change is here in the email body. So Kelly knows that the change is actually going from 4.55% to 4.65 in this particular case. She can scroll through the rest of the email body and validate that all of the other changes that she's made in the past are correct, including block level rules that drive in and out paragraphs into the communication, and you'll see this rule is based on the state of Arkansas. If she wants to preview the communication, we actually have a built-in email client preview within RapidCX. If we want to see the communication rendered for web, mobile, and desktop, and what that's going to do is render the communication so that fonts can be validated, that the layout can be validated to ensure any changes that were made do not affect the layout as they were. So as Kelly looks through, she's validated that the communication looks as it should. So she's going to exit that preview and she's going to move forward. And what this last step is going to allow her to do is highlight any trackable links within the communication. So there are actually 4 trackable links within this particular communication: viewing the account online, downloading the Fortunity application, chatting with us, and going to the privacy notice. So those are the links that will be tracked for this particular communication. And she's going to submit this as a brand new version. So now you'll see when Kelly returns to the revisions page that she now has a draft version 9, and she's going to move draft version 9 into proofing. But I do want to point out that version 8 is still the active version. So what that means is if there are any data files or payloads that come into the system, they are still going to leverage version 8 until version 9 is the active version. So we're going to move into manage proofing, and you'll see we're now at the proofing history page. There have been no proofs on this version, and we want to create a new proof. So Kelly's already created use case specific test data sets for this particular change. In this case, she modified the data variable for June 1st to show that that was the date, the effective date that the interest rate would change. So Kelly's going to enter in the email address of any recipient she wants to receive that proof. In this case, it's KristenAldridge@precisely.com, and hit next. And when we hit submit here, that's actually going to send an email proof of this particular communication, not only to Kristen, but it's also going to upload a copy of that proof to this version so that it will live with the life of version 9. If 6 months from now, someone wanted to come back and look at the full audit trail of what was created and what was approved, they can go in and see the exact proof that was sent to Kristen and ultimately approved on a particular date. So now if we go back to revisions, you'll see that that version has moved from draft to end proofing. So you're always step by step, in case you have to walk away, of what the version status is when running through proofing. Now, if I go back into manage proofing, that particular version proof is complete. I can view it. So now Kelly can see what the email is going to look like. It's plugged in with the data variables that she had in her test set. She can see the account ending as well as the change to 4.65%. So now she feels good that the changes she made are correct. So we're going to exit out of that. We're going to go back over and accept our proof. You also have the option to reject the proof if something would have been wrong, and you can reproof as you make changes. But in this case, Kelly's going to accept. It's going to confirm that we want to accept this version. And as we move back to the revisions, it is moved from in proofing to an accepted status. And we now have an additional button here called governance. And governance is the full workflow where we track the audit trail of people reviewing the proof, providing any feedback, ultimately approving the proof and activating it. So we're going to move into the approval workflow of our governance engine. We're going to start the approval workflow. Click on the desired response date. So Kelly wants to hear back today. And this is an email that will go into an email body of anyone that is a part of the workflow she chooses for governance. Please review the requested interest rate changes. Hit next. And now we're going to find the workflow we want to send. So users can actually create their own workflows. So there might be different combinations of compliance and legal, or just legal, or someone on the business team. In this case, we want to find the compliance workflow. We can always use the asterisk as our wildcard. So now I see compliance team approval. I see that that has 2 tiers. That is the one I want to select. And so you'll see here there are 2 tiers. There's the legal team and the compliance team. So what's going to happen when I submit this particular workflow is that the legal team is going to get an email telling them that there is a rapid object, in this case, an email body out here for their review and approval. Only once the legal team has approved does it move on to the compliance team for their approval and then come back to Kelly for activation into production. So we're going to hit submit. Those emails will now go out to legal and compliance, and you can see Tier 1 status is pending and Tier 2 is pending Tier 1 status. For the purposes of demonstration, we're going to act as if these users are out of office. So you'll see that changes now to approved for status 1. If there had been any feedback, that would be available in feedback. The user can also go in and cancel that approval as she moves along. So we're going to do the same thing here for Tier 2, out of office. And now as we go back into our template version 9, we have the change status button. So you see here we've now gone from proofing to governance, and now we have the option of changing the status of version 9 to make that our active template. So when I hit change status here, it's going to confirm and remind me that only one version can be active at a time. And when I hit OK, version 9 is now the active version of the template. So any data file that comes in or payload that comes in going forward will use version 9 with the updated rate change information within it. So now we've wrapped up Kelly's requested change. So now we're going to step through some of the other modules within RapidCX. The documents, approvals, and deliveries modules make up the RapidCX archive. These modules contain as-delivered communications and delivery tracking. They allow users like Kelly to search and retrieve the exact version of a communication, no matter the delivery channel. So that means if Kelly or any other back office or call center user received a customer call, they can look up the exact communication and follow along with the customer. So let's go through a quick use case in document search. Let's say that customer Thomas Wolf called and he has a question about a message on his banking statement. So Kelly would go into documents, click on search, go to the document type banking statements, and she can enter in any of the search terms applicable to Thomas Wolf. So in this case, we're going to enter in Thomas Wolf's name, hit submit, and all of Thomas's statements are then presented to Kelly. She can find which version of the statement, which dated statement that Thomas has a question on, click on that statement, and she can see the exact version of the statement that Thomas is looking at. There are no additional inserts added on the print room floor. Everything that Thomas was mailed or Thomas was emailed in this case is available in the communication that she's looking at. So that she can scroll down, see the important reminders, address any frequently asked questions he might have on his statement. In addition, we can also see any kind of deliveries that went out to Thomas if he has a question on a communication that went to him via SMS or email. So that wraps up the documents module as we go through. Next, the rapid communications module within the system is where one-to-one interactive and ad hoc communications can be triggered by API or by back office and call center teams. Those communications can be sent via email, SMS, or PDF using governed and approved templates to avoid compliance risk. So every communication triggered through rapid communications available in the archive that we just reviewed for tracking purposes. The Rapid Campaigns module is where one-to-many list-based communications can be triggered for delivery via SMS, email, or print. Rapid campaigns can be used for ad hoc collection efforts, targeted marketing, or even special events like weather shutting down a brick-and-mortar location, which we've seen. The Content Manager module houses all content business rules and content resources like logos, PDF attachments, footers, backer pages for use on communications. And finally, the Production Operations module, containing full end-to-end job tracking for every inbound and outbound batch or real-time payload job received by RapidCX, including those generated by the modules we just reviewed. So that wraps up our demonstration for this session. If you want to know more or receive a full demonstration of RapidCX, contact us through our website at precisely.com, and we'd be happy to give you more information. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Kristen. Great demo. As you can see at Engage, we believe when you engage your data, you can better engage your customers. Now, Kristen just showed you some exciting capabilities of Engage One RapidCX that we think can have a profound impact on your business. We're going to dig deeper into how you can further unlock millions of dollars in savings during our Engage breakout later today. I look forward to seeing you there.
Our last fires were in 2007, and we have an entire generation of people that have moved to these mountains since the last real fires. They know that fires exist. They know we spend a lot of time telling them to prepare and clear their property, but having the data that we can show them on a map or in graphs or statistics brings it home to them. That makes it more of a reality to them. And our goal is to have them take action towards being prepared. And the data really makes a difference. Likewise, in working with our first responder agencies, the data provides us a common language to work around and to prepare for when we're doing community wildfire protection plans or entering into a fire season that may be of higher nature than normal. For example, this year with all the rain, we know we're going to have a lot of fuels. So the data from the past and other areas really will help us speak with our first responders and engage them and helping us help our community.
Thank you, Chris and Kristen, for showing us data integrity in action with Engage One Rapid CX. And now I'm excited to introduce our expert panel, Demystifying ESG Reporting, which includes perspectives from the corporate, consulting, and regulatory sides of the ESG equation. Please welcome Pat McCarthy, Precisely Chief Revenue Officer, to get the conversation started.
Hi, everyone. ESG is certainly a hot topic today and something that organizations are responding to because of rising regulatory requirements and board-level scrutiny. I'm here to talk about ESG reporting with leading experts from a standards board and ESG consultancy. First, I'd like to introduce Matthew Rusk, head of GRI in North America. GRI is an independent international organization that helps companies take responsibility for their environmental impacts through a common language and set of metrics. And of course, consultants play a really important role in helping companies navigate ESG-related commitments in a way that aligns with their business model and goals. Here to represent the consultant point of view is Mikkel Skogard from Verisk Maplecroft. Thank you both for being here today. Mikkel, let's start with you. You get to see not only the challenges that organizations are grappling with on their reporting journey, but you get to see the outcomes. What are some of the most important opportunities you see companies pursuing in ESG reporting today?
Well, yeah, thanks a lot. I think it's important to understand where we are at the moment. As you alluded to earlier, we are a bit moving away from what we call a voluntary reporting ecosystem into a more regulated one. So many of the companies that we work with on a daily basis are taking this time of transition to change a few things when it actually comes to reporting. And so I think the first and foremost opportunity today they are going for is what we call reporting parity. The whole idea that non-financial data should be subject to different sort of treatment than financial data is rather changing fast. And so many of the companies we work with are asking themselves, if non-financial matters are financially material, then why should non-financial data be treated any different than financial data? And it shouldn't really. So I think that comes with a great opportunity to see that moment. And companies are taking this time to improve non-financial reporting so that it is subject to what we call the same conditions as financial reporting, both in terms of governance, process, approvals, controls, IT systems, seniority of staff, management attention, even number of staff. So we can see really allocating a lot more resources and attention to it compared to the past. And so it takes a while, but with that, there's a unique opportunity for them to get more internal engagement and a lot of awareness raisings amongst subject matter experts and data owners across the organization. I think the likely outcome will be an increasing integration of financial and non-financial data narrative to the point where they naturally blend. But I think that's the first opportunities companies we work with are actually pursuing, which is putting non-financial and financial reporting a bit of a parity in that sense. The second opportunity, which many of them are taking advantage of, or at least are pursuing, is the increasing focus on their value chain, not just from a reporting point of view, but also from an understanding point of view, and at both upstream as well as downstream value chain, and both positive as well as negative impacts, and how that translates to added value, but also to risk management and overall reporting. But ultimately, I think one of the major opportunities you're seeing as a whole for everyone, which is a huge opportunity in the ESG reporting space, and which is actually a very good one in my view, is that if you think about it historically, a lot of the ESG reporting practices have focused on we call listed companies. But the fact that we're now moving a bit into more regulated space, we see some of these reporting practices seep through to the private companies, which often in the past were not subject to the same reporting requirements, but which potentially, for example, with the CSRD in Europe, are in that sense. So I think that's also a very good opportunity that companies have now in order to improve their reporting, and that has many benefits. So I will say these are the major three opportunities we see: reporting parity, a lot more focus on the value chain, as well as the reporting practices going towards private enterprises, which were really subject to those requirements in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. You're in Madrid. Matthew's in New York. I'm recording this out of Chicago. This is a global initiative. From your perspective, when you think about maturity, do you have a perspective like where do you see the fast moving? Where do you see regulation? Maybe you can follow on with kind of the movement you see in the markets or in the different geographies around the world.
Yes. So I think what we're seeing is a bit like, I mean, there's many developments in place currently at the moment. And obviously every jurisdiction almost has its own reporting practices being developed and putting into place. I think the idea is what we see here more is that complying with all these different jurisdictional requirements is a big ask. But I think more importantly, what we see, one of the big conversation topics we're having is the differences between the jurisdictional requirements versus more global reporting trends and stakeholder expectations. And so what we see is a lot of like companies may be subject to certain reporting requirements, but rather the expectations of their stakeholders are different. And so they have to have those conversations internally. Is the regulated ESG reporting to which you're subject to, is it the ceiling or is it more like the floor in that sense? So I think that what we see, that how they tend to navigate that discussion is going to be very interesting going forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Mikkel. And I think we know that there's an incredible amount of business benefit that can come with ESG reporting when it is aligned to business value versus just reporting for reporting's sake. And in terms of the data required to fuel reporting, Matthew, can you share a bit about the importance of the accuracy, consistency, and context of data related to ESG reporting?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pat. So GRI, we're a global independent standard setter that really helps bring about a global common language for impact reporting, impact on the environment, society, and the economy. A real key purpose of ours is to bring about that common language and consistency to data across these different jurisdictions to be decision useful, because reporting is a means to an end. There is a lot of business benefit when a organization goes through the process of stakeholder engagement and going through processes to collect more data and insights about the organization's impact out on the world. So that's a key and valuable process. But it all comes back to reporting being a means to the ends and being decision useful for internal and external stakeholders. The way we do that is to continue to professionalize the reporting process beyond what's already occurred with the 11,000 plus organizations using our standards and even more, seen some kind of ESG and sustainability report globally. Those numbers are even higher. As an example, I even had a conversation today with a leading university that's conducting a research project on organizations disclosing biodiversity risk, opportunity, and dependencies and impacts. And they ran into an issue because that organization appeared to be a leader in sustainability in their disclosures, but it was using their own methodology and way to report. So it actually wasn't comparable and decision useful. So that's really a key driver for why we exist and why we continue to collaborate across different jurisdictions. At CSRD, we're a co-constructor on the impact reporting pillar of that. What we do with the standards, try to aggregate principles and metrics and protocols that are determined to be thorough and rigorous. And we do that through a multi-stakeholder process with due diligence around it to serve all these different stakeholder groups, because some of those drivers are regulatory bodies and policy. So when we create that common language, it creates that consistency. It allows mechanisms and the internal controls and the assurance processes to make sure that data is credible. So we are in support of the growing mandates going around for more reporting to bring it up to an elevated level like financial reporting. And also the push for more assurance, which some of that legislation is putting forward, but also the elevated stakeholder expectations have already driven a good amount of assurance when it comes to that data. Support the endeavors to make sure it's credible and consistent data also by working with partners. Sometimes that's service providers, the corporates themselves, but also key partners that help create the software tools and systems that create those processes that allow that data to be tracked, have the appropriate data owners, and aggregate things to produce disclosures and reports that, once again, are valuable and decision useful for internal and external stakeholders.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I think when you think about reporting a number or a metric, understanding where that data came from, the lineage of it, how was that indicator calculated, the consistency of that across maybe different standards and different industries, et cetera, it is a really complex topic. And if companies tried to solve it on their own versus leveraging what GRI produces or leveraging the insights that Verisk and Maplecroft have across this, we end up with a bunch of different answers that aren't based in reality, that maybe are subject to personal interpretation versus a standardization. And the standardization and the consistency around this is what can lift public and private companies universally versus each of them figuring that on their own. So it's great to have you both here to share those thoughts and those insights. Mikkel, I want to go back to something you talked about, materiality, non-material insights and impacts in the organization. We have a lot of data practitioners on here, data management folks that may or may not be familiar with that concept related to reporting inside of their organizations. Can you expand on that a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, sure. So I think materiality assessments are typically a tool that is being used to understand and therefore get to a conclusion is what are the typical non-financial issues that may be not just relevant but potentially material for the company. And by material, we have other two ways of measuring it. It's either material to the bottom line, it has a potential financial impact, but it also has what we call an outward impact. You have an impact on society or on the environment. And so it's a process that you go through systematically to understand which of, I say, a basket of ESG or non-financial issues that you now think are the most material, i.e. one of the highest impact, both internal impact financially, but also external impact. And typically that is done through a process that has a methodology to it, which typically involves quantification of risks, but also a lot of qualitative elements. So it's a bit of a half art, half science to it in that sense. There's no script. So you're just gonna have to figure it out a bit by trying. You're not gonna get it right the first year, so it's about trying. I think one of the things that is most important is that these materiality assessments, when they conducted, they are predominantly historically being conducted for reporting purposes to decide what information goes to a report. But more and more, they should also be conducted with a dual outcome to feed into other areas of the business, like the strategic discussion, setting KPIs, engaging management, internal communications, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a wide variety of outcomes of it that should be used, not just for reporting purposes, but for other purposes as well. But ultimately here, at least in the beginning, where materiality assessment, we feel is just as much about the process that it's about the outcome. So if you get the process right, and there's a logic and there's a method to how you reach those conclusions, the outcome is what it is. So I think those are the ones I would stress here in terms of how to conduct a bit of a materiality assessment.
That's very helpful. Matthew, from your perspective, how do you see that materializing inside of organizations?
The actually just updated our universal standards in 2021, and with that, our guidance on materiality assessments. And 3 of the 4 steps to produce a sustainability ESG report, 3 of them are on an ongoing basis, and that's to identify and assess impacts that the organization has on the economy, environment, and society. So the first one is understanding the organization's context. And if we do have a sector standard that is published, which we're doing that on an ongoing basis, that can help an organization do that assessment. The second is identify actual and potential impacts. And this is in conjunction with engaging with relevant stakeholders and experts. The third is assessing the significance of the impacts. And then you get to the bucket where you're actually prioritizing the significant impacts for reporting. So it goes back to this idea that reporting is not for reporting's sake. It is to really understand the organization's context, its potential and actual impacts, what your stakeholders and relevant experts are telling you about those impacts, and then prioritizing using the resources you have at hand to produce a report to enable decision useful information to your internal and external stakeholders. So you see that process now living out in organizations. And when they go through that process, it really becomes valuable to the organization and that want more accountability and transparency from organizations, and also want that information to be consistent, credible, and decision useful.
Yeah. What I think for this part of the conversation, what's been really insightful is, learning about how ESG reporting is impacting not just, the feel-good part of this, but actually the materiality part of it. And I think, Matthew, what you just talked about is it's gone from a point in time to an always-on concept. Like, I need to be able to be capturing, gathering, and reporting on this information on a much different kind of timeline than maybe organizations had been thinking about that traditionally. Bringing us to our final question for you both, given what we know about the opportunities and the data requirements for successful ESG initiatives, what advice would you have for those data leaders and those practitioners and those people that are involved in these processes here today? Mikkel, we'll start with you.
All right, well, thank you. I think a few things, actually. First of all, I'm going to go back to my earlier point that I made. I think my first advice would be try to treat non-financial data the same way you would financial data. Obviously, many different companies are at different stages of their ESG reporting adoption curve, and nobody expects you to go from 0 to hero, but try to put the same governance system into place, automatize the data collection, bring in some seniority into the function of ESG reporting, etc. So I think that would be my first advice. Also, try to don't just collect data for the sake of collecting data. I think often in our experience is often the best data, the highest quality of data is the one that is collected irrespective of the reporting. Your reporting just happens to be the end point in that sense. So often when you do collect data, analyze it and make it used for internal purposes. And there's 2 more things which I would also advise. Begin your discussions internally around materiality testing for non-financial risks and opportunities, because there's a lot of confusion around, is it double materiality, is it impact materiality, is it financial materiality, which one is it? And financial materiality may be easier to measure, but what about non-financial materiality? How do you make the test? How is something regarded material or potentially material? And so those discussions need to be had. I think that's very important. Where to draw the materiality line, where to draw the threshold. That's the second thing. And the third thing is also when it comes to reporting, not just data, the role of narrative. Because one thing we have seen many years is that if companies, for some reasons, have tended to a bit over-report on non-material issues, slightly under-report on material issues. And so what is the role of the data? I think spending too much time on non-material, say storytelling and anecdotal narrative potentially is a thing of the past, whereas now it should be more contextual narrative that is supportive of the data you're wanting to explain. I think that's also quite helpful because data without narrative is incomplete. So one is the denominator, one is the denominator. They kind of feed onto each other. And I think so those 3 aspects, the parity, the materiality discussion, as well as the role of supporting a supportive narrative to the data is very important.
Excellent. Matthew, your thoughts?
Yeah, what comes to mind is start today. This has already become a business as usual with 11,000 organizations using our standards, but many more globally. 90% of the Fortune 500 produce some kind of report. 60 global Fortune 500, about 70%. So it's already there and driven today by elevated stakeholder expectations. Clearly, we're going to have a lot more organizations pulled into some of these mandates that are coming out. Over 50,000 organizations will be affected by that. So it's already a business as usual, and it's going to have to elevate and professionalize that much more with some regulatory things coming in the near future. So you absolutely need to start today to meet those stakeholder expectations. But starting today also very much means looking around your organization where you are already. And though it's a journey of 1,000 steps, you're probably already taken a number of them, because particularly with disclosure and reporting or data tracking, so much of what I've seen directly on sustainability teams, but also working with reporters, this data sits with these different disciplines already in the organization, whether it's HR, tracking certain things, legal, environmental health and safety, certainly. So where it may feel like a Herculean task to start getting in line to where the stakeholder expectations are, it really is a process of sorting out what have you done a materiality assessment yet on your impacts? What data is already being tracked? What's already cited as your biggest impacts that your organization actually or potentially has on the environment, economy, and society? Because like Mikkel highlighted, it's easier to identify financial materiality of things maybe in the short term. But going through that materiality process, which is outlined in the GRI standards, it helps you hotspot your biggest impacts and what your stakeholders care about. But that, of course, helps you identify the areas where you need to address that will become financially material. Because if you have exploitation of people or planet, that is bound to hit your bottom line. It's just a matter of when. So paying attention to your impacts, paying attention to your stakeholders, and going through that process of reporting, which can feel like quite a feat. But it's not just for reporting's sake. It is absolutely helpful to the business, is pretty key. So definitely start today if you haven't already begun, and continue to professionalize that if you have, because that's what's being called for by your stakeholders and by regulators.
That's fantastic. I want to start with saying thank you both for being here today and sharing your insights. I think it's important that organizations like Precisely and our focus on data integrity and master data management, Matthew, the GRI, and your focus on understanding and establishing the standards and how people should reporting and understanding that at a detail level. And then Mikkel, for you, bringing your capabilities and your insights and your expertise to help companies actually produce these highly consistent, accurate, and contextually aware constructs around their ESG reporting. It's really, really appreciated. So I want to thank you for spending your time with us here today. I know that the audience got a lot out of this conversation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you all and your organizations in the months to come.
As we move into the fourth industrial revolution with digital transformation and increased automation, technology education is an absolute imperative for underrepresented groups. According to World Economic Forum, jobs of tomorrow show a severe underrepresentation of women. For example, in cloud computing, women make up only 14% of the workforce. In engineering, 20%, and in data and AI, 32%. There's tremendous opportunity for women to acquire digital skills and drive innovation, regardless of the career path they choose.
The simplest advice would be, don't think you need to be technical to thrive as a woman in tech. Beyond tech roles, there's marketing, sales support, operations, and beyond. And when thinking about tech, the reality is that it's so broad and impacts our everyday life. You and I are already living in tech from the moment we wake up. So find the tech you love and appreciate and make your incredible contributions there.
So every woman is unique, and so is their thought process and ideas.
So play to your strengths and do not get molded into the majority. Try everything, do everything, and don't be afraid to change your mind. And do not forget to advocate for each other.
When people think of women in technology, they often refer to software engineers, systems analysts, chief technology officers, and chief data officers. They don't often think of the sales side of women in technology. What I love about the sales side of technology is that it's extremely innovative, you're learning something new every day, and you'll never get bored.
My advice would be find a mentor. Mentors provide guidance, they provide encouragement, they provide connections that will serve you well in your career. I personally have found having a sounding board for someone to ask questions to and give me advice has been invaluable to my career. And once you're done finding a mentor, be a mentor.
Women in technology can make a powerful impact by mentoring girls who aspire to learn about the field. Mentors serve as advocates and educators, reminding girls of their strengths while opening doors to academic, social, and professional opportunities. Mentoring is an important way to empower young learners to become future leaders and to help close the gender gap in technology. The experience will enrich your life too.
Wow, what an enlightening discussion. And thank you to our amazing panelists and everyone who contributed to today's thought-provoking and engaging content. At Precisely, we're passionate about being the trusted data integrity partner to our customers and a leader in the data ecosystem at large. We are the only provider with a unique breadth and depth in data integrity software, data products, and strategic services to ensure the success of your data-driven business initiatives. Stay tuned for more from us, and we couldn't be more excited to keep the conversation going. Now, as we head into today's breakout sessions, I'd like to thank you for your engagement and insights throughout the conference. And be sure to take advantage of the live Q&A and schedule on follow-on demos or conversations with the Precisely team. And thanks everyone for joining Trust 23.